Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank you so much for joining this class today. On this occasion, we will talk about techniques and assessment for teaching listening and reading. Let's go to the first slide. Listening and reading origins and function. One of the obvious questions to ask is, how and when did listening and reading emerge? Well, another question is, what function did listening and reading emerge to serve? Or what functions do they serve at present and what function might they serve in the future? The oral modes of language are primary in evolutionary terms. All language have speech, but not all language even know have writing. The archetype of communication can be taken to be face-to-face interaction. According to Wagner, 2014, it is estimated that 50% or more of a person's time in communicative situations is spent by listening. The invention of writing has indubitably had a proven and lasting influence on individual, social, and cultural development. Thus, it is not surprising that there was a widespread belief in the mystical powers of writing. For thousands of years, literacy used to be very limited, and even today is not really universal. Reading was first reading aloud and reading for a group of listeners. And the next slide is, what is assessment? Before specifically considering the topic of assessing in listening and reading in particular, let me tell you about the meaning of assessment. Alright, assessment is an ongoing process that encompasses a much wider domain. Whenever a student responds to a question, offers a comment, or tries out a new word or structure, the teacher subconsciously makes an assessment essay. Its performance that ultimately is assessed by self, teacher, and possibly other students. Reading and listening activities usually require some sort of productive performance that the teacher implicitly judges. However, peripheral that judgment may be very useful for assessment. Let's go to the next slide. Are you still staying with me? Alright. What is the difference between assessment and tests? Assessment and tests are words in an order about two commonly used terms. It is tempting at times to simply think that assessment and tests are synonymous, appearing in free variation depending on the whim of the speaker or writer. A glance at some teacher reference book of 10 or more years ago could bear out such an assumption. However, in recent years, the profession seems to have come to an appropriate consensus that the two terms are in fact is not synonymous. Well, tests are a subset of assessment, and assessment is an ongoing pedagogical process that includes a number of evaluative acts to the part of the teacher. As for example, when a student responds to a question, offers a comment, or tries out a new word or structure, the teacher subconsciously makes an evaluating of the student's performance. A student's written work from notes or short answer to essays is judged by the teacher in reading and listening activities. Students' responses are implicitly evaluated. All that is assessment. Technically, it is referred to an informal assessment. Well, hello. Do you still in this video? Well, I bet so, because there are some more I want to talk it for you. Well, we're going to looking for the next slide. The technique assessment. The technique assessment are relatively quick and easy formative evaluation methods that help you check student understanding in real time. This formative evaluation provides information that can be used to modify, improve course content, adjust teaching methods, and ultimately improve students' learning. Formative evaluation are most effective when they are done frequently and the information is used to effect immediate adjustment in the day-to-day operation of the course. This technique is to gather information about the projects and learners can be done a variety of techniques, both associated with the learning process and learning outcomes. The information gathering technique in principle is a way of assessment of progress towards the achievement of student learning standards and basic competencies. Basic competency status assessment is done based on indicators of achievement of learning outcomes, either in the form of cognitive talents, effective and psychomotor. There are 7 techniques that can be used: assessment performance, attitude assessment, writing assessment, project assessment, product assessment, the use of portfolios, and self-assessment. Alright, we're going to the next slide. What is listening? Alright, let's talk about it. Listening is the ability to accurately perceive and interpret message in the communication process. Listening is key to all effective communication. Without the ability to listen effectively, messages are easily misunderstood. As a result, communication breaks down and the sender of the message can become frustrated or irritated. Alright? Listening is communicative behavior in which listeners try to construct a reasonable interpretation of a text for some communicative purpose by Harris and Palmer. And listening is the first skill and has been viewed as a primary vehicle for language acquisitions process people know and understand the meaning of something people hear by listening. Listening is a very important skill in language because by listening students can produce language like speaking and writing by vocabulary that they get from listening. Listening provides a foundation for all aspects of language and cognitive development, and it plays a lifelong role in the process of learning and communication essential to productive participation of life. Well, we are going to the next slide, but before we do it, I just want to say you to stay in this video because the next slide is gonna be delivered by my friend. So see you in the next slide.
The importance of listening. In language learning can hardly be overestimated. In classroom, students always do more listening than reading. Listening competence is universally larger than other competence. One of the main reasons for getting students to listen to spoken English is to let them hear different varieties and access. In today's world, they need to be exposed not only to one variety of English. Okay? Listening is not one-way street. It is not merely the process of unidirectional receiving of audible symbol one method. The first step of listening comprehension is the motor process of receiving some messages through the ear and transmitting nerve impulse to the brain. Every classroom lesson involves some form of assessment, whether it whether it is in the form of informal, unplanned, and intuitive teacher processing and feedback, or informal prepare score text. But also the varieties such as American English, Australian English, Canadian English, Indian English, or West Africa English. There are number of ways in which listening activities differ from other classroom exercise. Firstly, TEFL go at the same speed for everybody. Unlike language study or speaking practice or even reading, where individual student can read to some at their own space. The type continues even if individual students are close. Leading a listener to type cannot climb back to previous paragraph, read the highlight, stop to look the picture, and think for a bit before continuing. On the contrary, they have to go with bit of the voice as they are listening to. Of course, they can stop that and revive them, but excessively the speed of the speaker as dominant and the interaction, not that of listener. Okay, the next in listening. Okay, let's talk about it. If you need to access your student, listening is skill. There are number of factor you need to consider. These include considering the text taker and their needs. The kind of information you want to know about their listening skill, and the most appropriate ways to access this skill so that your text is appropriate and accurately scored. Listening is a vital skill, but it can be challenging to access. But without the assessment component in every listening activity and every course, we could determine the intent of objective and goals. To active listening, we have to consider to what level and what assessment methods appropriate to our student. We have also considered to the micro of listening, from processing tiny bits and bits of language of strategy, interactive and complex skill of extended discourse. Okay. The type of text we can use to text listening skill. They are: the first, pick up word or spell word correctly. The second, recognize the correct tense, change the tense given. The third, deduce meaning of unlocked word from context, right about the situation. The fifth, identify the main idea. The fourth, identify the main idea. The fifth, summarize through speaking or writing. And the last, listen for specific information. So In common with the assessment of reading skill that of listening skill is proposed indirect. When some speak or writer or write, there is discernible and accessible product. Merely watching people listening often tell us little or nothing about the level of compression they are achieving or the skill they are deploying. This uncle for the fact that both listening and speaking skill are often accessed simultaneously in real life. Listening is rarely practiced in isolation, and the listener responds that what is here is reliable way to access how much has been compressed. So we here are the sound of language and math. This with work we already know. Then we group them together into process which help will help us define what the topic is. Finally, we make a connection between what we think we have here with our accepted knowledge. The reason why we need to define what listening skill we want to text and why. Okay, all assessment start or should start from consideration of the aims of instruction. With listening skill has with reading skill, however, it is notoriously difficult to identify specific skill with like to specific purpose. An argument can almost always be made that the following are the key macro listening skill, whatever the setting, whatever the purpose, and whatever the topic and text step. What is reading? Okay, let's talk about it. Reading is useful for language acquisition. Reading is skill that has to be possessed by learner in learning language. Reading relate to language. Language is tool of communication in daily activity because language is tool of communication. So in communication, it needs information. For getting information, the learner or yours must have communicative competence. By having communicative competence, the learner or yours can get proper information. And we can conclude that reading is an activity in understand written text. Okay, next lesson. Next type of reading. Type of reading. Brown say that for considering assessment producer separate type performs are difficult in the film, and this will serve as organism of various assessment texts, such as perceptive, selective, interactive, and extensive. So the first perceptive reading. Perceptive reading text involve attending to the component of larger stretches of discourse, letter, word, punctuation, on other graphic symbol. So the second, selective reading. Selective reading in order to exercise one's reading recognition of lexical, grammatical, or discourse feature of language within very short stretch of language. Certain typical texts are used feature good text matching, true or false, and multiple choose and exercise. Interactive reading. Interactive reading, the focus of interactive text is to the identify relevant feature lexical, symbolic, grammatical, and discourse. Within text of moderately short length with the object of retraining the information that is processed. So extensive reading in applies to text of more than fact, up to including professional articles, essay, technical reports, short story, and book. Focus of interactive text is to identify relevant future lexical, symbolic, grammatical, and discourse. Within text of moderately short length with the objective of refining the information that is processed. So the last, extensive reading. Extensive reading, it applies to text of more than fact, up to and including professional article, essay, technical report, short story, and book.
Okay, so today I want to explain about assessing and reading. To carry out assessment for learning effectively, teachers need a significant amount of training and students need a consistent support and reinforcement. Assessment for learning works when it used consistently and positively over an extended period of time. To be encouraged to see assessment for learning practice in a positive light. This need a for positive learning cycle around brief, consistent, and informative assessment means that teachers must not use the assessment procedures primarily to short, evaluate, and grade students. And when implementing assessment for learning, the first step is to agree upon feedback mechanism from student to teachers that allow students to signal difficulties that they are having. And there's three ways to assess in reading. First, address skills needed to improve learning. And the second, encourage greater student awareness of what successful outcomes would look like. And the third, provide opportunities to help students become more successful. And we also have 5 basic in assessing reading process. The first one is microprocess, refers to the reader's initial chunking of idea units within individual sentence. Chunking involves grouping words into phrases or clusters of words that carry meaning and requires an understanding of syntax as well as vocabulary. The second one is integrative process, this process of understanding and inferring the relationships among clauses. The third one is microprocess. Ideas are better understood and more easily to remember when the reader is able to organize them in a coherent way. The fourth one is elaborative process. Elaborative process is a process of making inference to draw upon information provided earlier in the text or upon our own previous experience. And the last one is metacognitive process. It is thinking about it involved in monitoring understanding, selecting what to remember and regulating the strategies used when you read. Assessment for teaching, listening, and reading. And what if we do both? It can be difficult to assess reading and listening skills. When students speak or write in English, you can listen to what they say and read what they write. However, when they read or listen to English, it is difficult to know what they understand. Table 2 shows some activities you can do to collect information about what your students have understood when reading or listening to a text. These activities can be carried out in the course of regular classroom teachings or as an informal test to form part of formative assessment. In many ways, the consideration of testing and assessing listening abilities parallels that of assessing reading. Both are receptive skills, and both can be broken down in similar ways. The essential difference between the skills is that the listener cannot move backwards and forwards through the text at will, but must listen for the data in the order in and speed at which is the speaker chooses to deliver to them. The type of learning and teaching methods. These are activities that teacher or tutor can apply to their students. The first is comprehension questions. Comprehension questions. Students listen to or read a passage in English and answer the question about it. You can use the question from the textbooks, write your own, or even ask the students to write the question. Question and answer can be in English or your home language. This can be very beneficial for students who can read or listen to the text very well but struggle to write in English. If they can write in their home language, they can say what they have understood. It can be useful for the student to review the question before they start reading or writing, so that they know what they need to find or listen out for. And the second is writing summaries. Students listen to or read a passage in English and write a summary about what they have understood. This can be written in the home language so that you are not assessing the students' writing skills, but whether they have understood what they have heard or read. You can encourage the students to take notes as they listen or read. They can use these notes to write the summaries. And for the third is discussions. Students can talk or write about what they found interesting or enjoyable in the text. This can be particularly useful for the text from the supplementary reader. They can discuss it in English or with their home language, as the purpose of doing this is to find out what they have understood from the text. If you want to get a big impact, you can use abilities and skill. Some teachers use reading aloud as a way to assess their students' reading skills. There are some problems with using this technique for this purpose, as it doesn't really tell you how much the students have understood about the passage. In fact, it is more of the test of students' pronunciation skills. Some teachers use dictation as a way of getting students to practice speaking, listening, and writing. Dictation can be easy, marked, and grade, and students can mark their own and each other's work. However, in dictations, students then often focus on the meaning what is being said. So, make sure that you use other activities as well if you want to have a good idea of your students' listening skills. To get a sense of your students' listening and reading abilities, it is best to use a variety of activities with as many different texts as you can. These texts can be from the textbooks, the supplementary reader, or any other text such as a story or newspaper article. For listening, you could read a short section of any of these. If you have access to a radio or mobile phone with speaker, you could play an audio recording whenever you do an activities like this. Give students plenty of time to read the text and let students listen to the passage more than once.